Hello, beautiful people. Today we're here to talk about how does positivity play a role in leadership. Positivity is a bit of a tricky one because people can overdo positivity and that will actually create a negative reaction in other people. But there's a couple of things I want to talk about in this video. One is that positivity could be not just a trait, but a leadership strategy. If you think of it as a soft skill, you're actually missing an opportunity to be able to build momentum with whatever initiative or work that you're doing. And the question for you too is, are you leading with optimism or are you just reacting with urgency? And what would it take for you to be optimistic about something that you're doing where you're just leading in a reactive way? At the end of this video, I want you to understand how positivity can actually, done well and done right, can actually lead to an opportunity to build trust, an opportunity to build momentum, and an opportunity to create a deeper understanding for people of what are the abundance of opportunities that exist out there for them. As a leader, I also would like to help you understand how your emotional tone sets the tone to a large extent for the rest of your team. I want you to learn how to apply positive leadership practices in day-to-day conversations. I want you to recognize the difference between toxic positivity and grounded optimism, and also help you make a mindset shift from fixing problems to inspiring people to come up with great solutions. Let's define for a minute what positive leadership is. For me, I have a practice. Whenever I'm faced with something that I think is negative, and I feel, that visceral feeling that you get, that reaction that you have when something shows up that's kind of pushing against your comfort zone or your boundaries or your values or your sense of right and wrong, and you're just like, ooh, that doesn't feel right. What I tend to do, what I've trained myself to do, is I do best, worst, most likely. So I do best possible outcome, worst possible outcome, and then somewhere in the middle of that is the most likely outcome, because outcomes tend to follow a fairly sort of normal structure. They're not vacillating like this all the time. Sometimes you will have hideous things happen to you. Sometimes you will have magnificent things happen to you. But on a day-to-day basis, most of the things that happen to you are kind of somewhere in this bandwidth. So I've trained myself to do best, worst, most likely. Then I go with the most likely one. Now, I keep an eye on the best one and I keep an eye on the worst one, but I go with the most likely one. And what I found as a leader, if I'm realistic with people around how challenging something is, how difficult something is, how positive I am about it or how negative I am about it, then what I'm doing is I'm actually showing them my authentic self, and that builds trust. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll say, look, worst case scenario, this could happen. Best case scenario, this could happen. Most likely is we're going to deliver this value. We're going to solve this problem. We're going to make this outcome happen. And people will go, no, okay, I got it. And I see where she's coming from. And so I will then focus on the most likely and the positive, because that will pull us out of our fear of the negative. So when we talk about toxic positivity, we're talking about people who are just relentlessly positive about absolutely everything. And you get to the point where you can't even hear them and you don't trust them anymore. The grounded optimism and the practice of grounding your optimism, I find, is most effective when you do best, worst, most likely. Because what you're doing is you're saying, I'm choosing to be optimistic about the best case scenario, and I am grounded in the reality of what is the most likely scenario. And I'm allowing for the innovation or the opportunity or the contribution of others to fill in that gap and allow us to be able to come somewhere close to best case scenario. If we're realistic with people who we lead and we step them through that process, it actually enhances their trust of us. It enhances their well-being for themselves in general. If you work in an incredibly negative environment with a boss who finds fault with everything and who sees all the things that can possibly go wrong and speaks about them openly and ongoingly, it erodes your health. It actually lowers your immune system. So positivity has a huge role to play in leadership if it's played well and carefully. Positivity also builds trust in leadership, and because it produces a level of confidence that says, hey, this person understands what it is they're trying to do. They're realistic about what can go right and wrong. They're optimistic about the future. They're finding ways to make this work. I'm happy to follow them because we're going to be successful and we're going to have good outcomes. So positivity allows you to be able to help people see what's possible in a positive light and sometimes pull them out of their resistance to change or their struggle with themselves to be able to see positive possible outcomes. I've been working with innovators for most of my career, and now I work pretty much exclusively with innovators because I love the positivity. But what I found is innovators are incredibly optimistic and positive, and they're shooting for the moon, but they're also quite dour about the reality of what they think is really possible. So they're balancing those two all of the time. And I think the really great innovation happens in that creative tension between the reality in the back of your mind somewhere of knowing that everything could go wrong, but the choice to be optimistic around what is really possible for the future. Because that's kind of the story that we're selling, but we're selling it in the reality of what we think we can realistically make happen. So positive leaders foster innovation and they foster creativity, because what they do is they allow the optimists among us, and I would absolutely consider myself one of them, a ridiculous optimist, the optimist among us to go, oh, that sounds fantastic. I want to help make that happen. And then we come back to the reality and go, this is going to take a lot of work. This is going to be a lot of effort. This is going to be difficult. We're going to encounter resistance. But I think all of those are absolutely relevant and important for engaging people in anything that it is that they do. There's a fantastic story about Ernest Shackleton, the great explorer who navigated to the South Pole. And what he did was he had this huge vision of how important this expedition was, how it was going to help us understand our world, and what an amazing event it was going to be for humanity to go to the South Pole. And what he did was he recognized all of that and he was super enthusiastic about it because that's how he went about getting the funding for it. But at the same time, he put an ad in the newspaper saying men wanted, and a whole bunch of women applied too, so kudos to them. Men wanted for long, arduous, difficult journey. You may not come back from this, you may die. And he went on, I'm not going to get the words exactly, but he went on, you may not come back from this. It is going to be hard, you are going to suffer, but there will be huge accolades and rewards and recognition at the end if you accomplish what we're setting out to do. So he was being incredibly realistic and doing the best case scenario at the same time. And he got hundreds of thousands of applicants because people appreciated the reality of him saying this is going to be hard and the optimism of him saying this is going to be fantastic when we accomplish it. Positive leadership can also mitigate stress and burnout. So if people get into the mindset of problem solving and tackling difficult things, and they have a leader who is constantly telling them how hard everything is going to be and how difficult everything is going to be, it wears them down. As I said earlier, it actually physically impacts their immune system. We're not looking for people to be Pollyannas and be nothing but positive, but if we can follow people who are realistic, as lots of people wanted to follow Shackleton, if we follow people who are realistic, we can actually gain more confidence in our own ability to be able to deliver on our results and overcome obstacles and overcome resistance and overcome difficulty. So as you lead people with a more optimistic or positive approach, what you'll find is that it actually helps them with their resilience, it helps them with having less burnout, and it helps them having less resistance to change. If you've ever signed up for what you knew was going to be a difficult project, but that had fabulous potential outcomes, you'll also know that you were signing up for a big growth spurt in your own leadership. And what's been proven time and time again is that positive leadership can actually create huge opportunities for people to be able to grow their own leadership. So from an employee development standpoint, if you're looking to develop people, you guiding yourself, reminding yourself to come back to positive leadership on an ongoing basis is really important for your ability to be able to grow teams around you. Now, thing to remember is this is not an automatic practice. This is a practice that you're going to have to teach yourself, because what you're doing as you're teaching yourself how to do it is you're teaching yourself how to be realistic. You're teaching yourself how to acknowledge the risk, but not necessarily spend a whole ton of time talking about it. You do need to acknowledge it. And you're also teaching yourself how to be able to overcome your own fear of failure and be able to talk about things in a positive light. Once you start doing that and you start doing it in a small role and a progressively bigger role, what you'll find is that you begin to hear yourself speaking like a leader. You begin to hear yourself speaking about what is possible, about the positive outcomes, about the opportunities for growth, and while at the same time acknowledging the risk and acknowledging the amount of effort that's required. So get started on doing that as soon as you possibly can, and get started on grounding yourself in your own positive optimism and building that for yourself. When you catch yourself going, oh my gosh, this is going to be the hardest thing we've ever done, how on earth am I going to make it happen? Move yourself back to the middle again and start looking at what is a realistic outcome if I am optimistic and positive about this. As you start doing that, once you start doing that, you will put yourself in a position where you are going to get promoted. As you do that, I would love you to do the Get Promoted assessment. It will help you build this internal perspective and self-reflection to allow you to be able to build practices around leadership, of which being positive is one of them. And if you take the assessment below, it's down in the comments. It's also www.getpromotedassessment.com. And let me know how it goes for you, and let me know if that begins the dialogue for you. And let's continue the dialogue down in the comments. If you want more of this kind of leadership guidance, please let me know. I would love to help you get there. Take care and best of luck.